You're listening to the Public Finance Live podcast series, brought to you by the PF editorial team, directly from SIPFA's 2025 annual conference in Birmingham, England. You can listen to our full series of episodes on the big issues being discussed at this year's conference by searching PF Live wherever you get your podcasts, or by visiting the podcast section of the Public Finance website. Hello and welcome to this episode of the PF Live podcast. In this episode, we'll be taking a look back over this year's PF Live conference in Birmingham, picking out some highlights, some key messages, and some things we've enjoyed across an action-packed 2 days. To do that, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by SIPFA CEO Owen Mapley and the editor of Public Finance magazine, Martin Reed. Thanks both for joining.
Good to be here.
Great stuff. Brilliant event. I'm sure you'll agree. Owen, I'll start with you, if I may. For those that weren't able to attend this year, can you just share a flavour of the event and the sort of overarching theme?
Absolutely. Well, what do you call a collection of accountants? I'm sure there's many words, but there's been lots of things shared here over the last couple of days in Birmingham, where we've got people from all different stages of their career coming together to talk about the key themes, which for us this year, absolutely still the profession. That's the heart of SIPFA. So what that means for today and tomorrow. Really important at the moment is around public trust. We've seen that being eroded. So what's the role of finance in supporting that? But also with lots of change going on, public service reform, and also those big macro themes, place, planet, those sort of things. So a real breadth of things.
Brilliant. And look, given the turbulent political and economic environments right now, there are plenty of other issues dominating public sector finance leaders' agendas right now. Can you share some of the more common themes coming out of PF Live 25? And did you get a sense of what's really at the top of the agenda for many finance leaders right now?
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much going on. There's a lot of necessary reform that needs to take place, a lot of overdue things that need addressing. And so it is good to see there's been a number of things announced and there's more reforms coming later on this year. But of course, whilst that's welcome, that also creates challenges for finance professionals, just that volume and what that means for capacity and bandwidth to think and reflect on top of really busy day to day. So it's that volume and that capacity pressure that's been up there. In terms of the specifics, there's been a lot of talk about local government reorganisation, inevitable, that affects a lot of councils. But we've also seen other issues that we really need to pay attention to around things like the role of technology, recovering where we are on local audits, those sorts of things. So it's been a real breadth from the macro to the very specific.
Yeah, Martin, say?
Just to say, I think that, this being my first PF Live, I have seen real dynamism, a real interest in these difficult to centre on topics, particularly around technology. I know from what I've been told that AI was a big theme last year. It is again this year. But what I also find interesting is just how much there is an audience enthusiasm. What I also found interesting, when you mentioned this idea of this issue of capacity, and of course people talk about AI making people managers. They're not administrators as much anymore. They'll be able to do more of what they came into the sector for.
Was there one session in particular that you found really interesting or enjoyable?
There was, and I'll say it absolutely left me with goosebumps, because I think it's important to focus on the big macro issues. But I also love how this conference provides practical tips and hints for people developing their careers. So I went to a session run by our fantastic president of the SIPFA Student Society, Susanna Farrell, who was joined by three colleagues at different stages in their careers. We had Lindy, one of our directors at SIPFA, Steph Donaldson, who's a deputy chief exec and chief finance officer, and Lynn New, who's a finance manager in the middle of her career. And all of them were so open about what they've learnt as they've developed their careers. Steph gave some fantastic top tips about what she would tell the 21-year-old Steph if she could speak to her today. And they were things like, be flexible, be open to opportunity, be brave, keep your CV up to date. I won't do it justice, but I think there's an article ready-made to go, Stephanie, if you want to do that. But hearing from colleagues giving their experiences, you could feel the energy in the room. And as I say, I found it utterly inspirational.
That's fantastic. Enthusiasm really comes through. Martin, one session for you?
If it has to be one session, it's got to be the one yesterday, Unlocking Urban Potential, Strategic Asset Optimization for Sustainable Revenue Generation, which is about probably the most syllables of any of the sessions thus far. But from my background in the built environment, the interest in how we can reimagine the urban asset management through public sector reform and making the most of the space that we know is evolving in terms of use through retail and anything else that comes under the umbrella of the public sector. I think there's just a huge amount of, well, there's uncertainty too, but I think there's opportunity. And I think talk about the possible introduction of new ways of keeping funds locally to actually do something around that.
In another recurring message that I picked up this year has been the importance of governance and maintaining standards. Is that particularly pertinent in the current climate?
It absolutely is. I remember a vivid phrase that Max Callow uses around the importance of doing the boring well. But I prefer to use the phrase firm foundations. And it's clear that all public service organisations, but particularly councils, really need to be built on solid foundations where strong governance, transparency, and mutual respect between councillors and officers and vice versa, working with stakeholders, engaging with local communities, that has to be based on high standards of behaviour, high standards of performance, and relying on reliable data and professionalism, etc. But of course, it's a volatile world. It's a politically unstable world, both internationally and nationally. And so I think it's never been more important to hold on to the importance of being able to disagree without being disagreeable. So I really welcome that focus on standards, and I'd support everyone doing their bit to maintain high standards across public service.
Great. And look, some terrific highlights shared in that discussion there. But Owen, look, over 700 people on site at this year's event across 3 days, if you include the President's Dinner on Monday evening, and dozens of fantastic sessions to learn from. How valuable is this annual conference for delegates, and how important is it in the SITFA calendar?
It's so important. Easy to say, but why is that? Well, at a time when diaries and day jobs and inboxes are so busy, I would argue it's even more important to find the time to pause for a moment, to reflect, to connect, to learn, and also try and have a bit of fun as well. So as we've discussed on this cast, we've seen people at all different stages of their careers. We've seen people reconnecting from earlier in their career, and we've seen people learning really important things in a rapidly changing world. So I am delighted to come to my second Public Finance Live, and I can't wait to attend the others we've got coming up in regions in the devolved countries, and then coming back again next year.
Absolutely. Well, from my point of view, it's been another fantastic PF Live with some brilliant content, and not least our podcast series, which has seen us produce 9 fantastic episodes across the 2 days here, with some really authentic insights from people on the front line of dealing with lots of these challenges. Owen and Martin, thanks very much for joining me to review PF Live 2025. I look forward to seeing you next year.
Cheers.
Okay.
You've been listening to an episode of our Public Finance Live podcast series, brought to you by the PF editorial team, directly from SITFA's 2025 annual conference in Birmingham, England. You can listen to our full series of episodes on the big issues being discussed at this year's conference by searching PF Live wherever you get your podcasts.